7. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Zach Bartles. Zach, what's going on, man?
Hey, man. Snow day number 7 today.
Now, let me ask you, is it like full all-out snow day where nobody's going anywhere or doing anything?
Well, I mean, today I went across the state, but, it was pretty nasty out. I took one step out my front door and I went down. It was an ice day, really, not a snow day.
Gotcha. School's canceled over there?
Oh, yeah. School's been canceled. It's like, I don't even know if my kid remembers his teachers or his classmates or anything.
I remember those days. Thankfully, we haven't had any more horrible weather at this point. It looks like next week we might be getting a couple days. But after we kind of braved that cold weather last week, things actually warmed up quite a bit. We experienced weather in the 60s on Tuesday, so
nice.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Not too shabby at all. Excited about what we're going to be talking about today, as I always am. But first, we do have two sponsors to bring about. One is, of course, Missionaware. Zach, I got to ask you, have you heard anything from our boy Jeff over there?
Dude, no. Jeff's dead to me.
Okay.
I still don't have my busts. I don't know what's going on. I think one of these days he and I are going to be, in the middle of the street. It's going to be wind, some tumbleweeds, little mouth harp music in the background, and we're going to have this thing out. Yeah. It's coming, man. It's coming. And then he's going to, pull out a tennis ball and whack it at me with a tennis racket. That's a reference to a whole, backstory for Jeff that me and Ted Cluck put together one day.
Nice. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, or, you're just going to end up at another conference with him and he's just going to have, a bunch of stuff on there and just give it to you and then I'll be forgiven for, a month.
That will work if the stuff that he has is 2 busts, one of Calvin and one of Spurgeon.
Nice. All right, well, definitely check out Missionaware. We are recording right now. It is February 7th, which means next Thursday, February 14th, is Valentine's Day. I was still looking at some things that I might pull from Missionaware, so I might just go to my wife and be like, hey, how about something off Missionaware's site? I do, it is like pulling teeth to try to get a hold of them. I still like their products, though. I mean, it's kind of like Starbucks almost, Are you a Starbucks person?
No.
Oh, you're not? See, I'm really not, except for the fact that I enjoy their iced tea lemonades. And so I like going there to get one of those. And I really don't like the Starbucks atmosphere, but I just can't stay away because I really enjoy that drink. So, I just really, really enjoy getting over to Missionaware, looking at all the products that they have. There's always something new going on. So check out Missionaware, pick something up for Valentine's Day, the one you love or the one you don't love, and it'll be great. Excited about this next sponsor too. We have Building Hope Ministries. You can go to their website, buildinghopenow.org. That's buildinghopenow.org, and check them out. They are a friend of mine, Mike Callahan. He is a co-worker of mine at school. Developed this ministry back in 2007. He's going to be joining the podcast in 2 weeks, February 21st. And he's going to be on talking about their fivefold ministry that includes church construction, food for children with HIV and AIDS, children. Wow. They provide stuff for children for educational needs, school supplies, uniforms, things like that. They build wells for drinking water over there, and then they also provide clothes for widows. So Mike Callahan's going to be joining us in 2 weeks to talk about his ministry and the things that are going on there. And we'll be putting out some different information on them. I actually was just kind of looking around their website. I was looking around the internet as well, just seeing what else was available. They got a cool YouTube video, about a 5-minute YouTube video from 2014 that actually describes their ministry fairly well and accurately. So check out buildinghopenow.org. So, Zach, this past Sunday was the Super Bowl, and I was excited. This is one that I enjoy doing every year, is the Super Bowl episode. And I texted you, and you were like, "Yeah, man, I didn't watch it." So I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll sit there and talk. And if you have any questions or anything like that, we can talk about that." But we actually do have a topic connected with the Super Bowl. And
I'm not going to have any questions about the Super Bowl. I can tell you already, right off the bat.
Well, and I would think not, dude. It was first of all, it was the lowest scoring Super Bowl game in history. So it broke that record, not in a good way. It was a very dull and boring game. It was basically 3-0 up until I think the second half, and then after the second half it was 3-3, and then finally things picked up a little bit in the fourth quarter to bring it to, I think it was 13-3. So it was not a terribly exciting game. I grew up in New England. I've mentioned that on this podcast before. If I'm going to root for any football team, it would be the Patriots, although I'm not a huge sports fan in general. And I was disappointed. This is usually the one game a year that I enjoy watching. You know, this is the 6th Super Bowl championship for the Patriots, and it was just it was incredibly boring. You did not miss anything. And unfortunately, too, the commercials sometimes can, redeem the thing. You're like, okay, well, if I'm not going to get a good Super Bowl, at least I'll get some good commercials. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. Now, let me ask you, coming out of the Super Bowl was the new Avengers trailer, as well as another Captain Marvel trailer. Have you seen either of those?
I did see the Avengers one. I think I saw that during the Super Bowl, actually, on Twitter.
Oh, okay. So you were able to pull that up. It was funny because I was watching with a group of people, and it's another teaser trailer. They're not really showing you much, and everyone started to get excited. They realized it was a teaser, and then they were like, "Really? That's it?" I said, "Yeah, but the great news is you're going to go online tomorrow and find 3 hours worth of commentary on this one little teaser trailer." So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. But really, other than some of the trailers that were coming out, there weren't any notable commercials. There wasn't a notable game. It was. I will say it was enjoyable to get together with people, have a good time of fellowship. I go to a buddy's house every year, and he invites his church friends and family over to watch the game. And so that's always enjoyable, always good conversations, good food. So that was, an upside, but nothing really notable at all. But on that comes the heels of our topic, and that is leading up to it, kind of that Saturday and then into the Sunday. I was seeing some memes coming from our lovely Reformed community, and there was a lot of shaming of people, I guess, as it were, who were intending on skipping church that night and watching the Super Bowl game. And Zach, I just thoughts and views on people just in general, if they're going to skip Sunday night church to watch the Super Bowl game, and then on shaming people to do it.
Well, I mean, we don't have a Sunday night service, so that's no problem at my church. I do have a men's group, meets every first and third Sunday evening of the month.
Yep.
And I actually texted them all earlier that week, and let me just be kind of authentic, which is one of these buzzwords that we were talking about.
Right.
And I told them, listen, I'm going to have to be doing a really unpleasant preparation for a certain medical test that older guys get. That involves looking deep within and making sure everything is wonderful. And so you don't have to decide between Jesus and the Super Bowl. You can, we'll just forego having our meeting this time, and you can all watch the Super Bowl. And a couple guys texted me later, and they were like, I think I would rather be doing what you're doing right now than watching the Super Bowl. But honestly, I think probably even if I hadn't had set that up 6 months ago before we started this meeting schedule, I would have just straw pulled them.
Yeah.
If there were 2 or 3 guys who still wanted to get together, I would have said okay. If all 11 guys or whatever that have been part of that group said sorry, I'm either hosting a Super Bowl party or I got to go to one.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't have tried to make them feel less spiritual for it, or and it's not even. I've got no interest in it, but I get it. I mean, it's a rare thing. It's a communal thing. I feel like if a church is going to do everything it can to cut people off from those sort of opportunities to interact with non-Christians and Christians alike, and be part of their community and their neighborhood and their friend groups, they're flirting with cult territory, really. Yeah. I mean, where you start, it's like I remember going over some stuff when I was doing some training. We were doing some training before a new group of people went to work in the nursery at another church that I worked with, and we had these materials from our insurance company and from a ministry. Basically, it was called the Good Shepherd program. It was all about making sure that kids are not in any way exposed to predators, and that the churches are very intentional about all this stuff. And I remember one of the things was if any adult is possessive about your child, that should be a huge red flag. Like, if an adult's like, oh, I love your kid, they're so cool, they're so funny, I like it when I get to watch it. But if they're weirdly possessive, if they're like, you're mine,
right,
that's a red flag. No matter what, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
No matter what they're doing or not doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like with churches, it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
If the church is like, no, on Sunday night I own you, maybe it's time to reevaluate whether this is a little bit weird of a relationship.
Yeah.
I don't have any interest in belonging to or pastoring that kind of a congregation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think, despite our disagreement last month, this is something that I really, I resonate with you on.
I forgot about that. Dude, you're such a jerk.
Bringing that back up again. Water under the bridge, man. Water under the bridge. No, I mean, I look at it in kind of the same vein as like, Halloween or 4th of July or, Christmas or something like these big kind of defining moments that just as a society, we have an opportunity to go out and be the church in the world. And we don't even have to go out. People are willing to come to us and enjoy a time of fellowship. One of the things that I appreciate about this party that I go to every year is there are believers and unbelievers there. It's not just his church friends and family, but there are also others that come to this. It really is a time where people get together and, they're hating on the Patriots or, they're loving on them, and you're just in a good way going back and forth, and you're able to have some great, meaningful conversations with people. And this year, the guy did something a little different, which was cool. During halftime, he, grabbed a bunch of guys, and they went out on the back porch and, were smoking some cigars. I mean, it was a nice enough night. The weather had, subsided at that point, so it was kind of low 50s, low to mid 50s. And so, for kind of that second half of the game, they were just out hanging out, having a good time. My wife and I ended up leaving a little early, or else I would have joined them. But, and it's a great time to talk and hang out and really have an influence on people, even if you're not directly, pounding them over the head with Jesus and the Bible. People come in, they see, wow, Christians are having a good time. They're rooting for their teams just like I am. And, I really like these people. And, you make it difficult for them to, not like you. And to me,
now, hold on though, dude. I was assuming that we were talking about a real spiritual Super Bowl party where you play the Billy Graham video at halftime and everything. If you're just talking about frivolous, worldly merrymaking, then no, of course I'm against
it. Well, the good news is no one broke out the keg.
Oh, well, there you go.
But, I mean, to me, that's just an opportunity where, we talked about hosting Halloween parties, going out trick-or-treating, like things that Halloween affords Christians. And so I think clearly if your, conscience is, bound in some way, we don't want to bind anyone's conscience, so if you feel like, well, my church is, they're having a service and I feel like I should be there as opposed to Super Bowl. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are railing against other people for making a decision that this is what I'm going to do instead of going to church. And I think there's, a lot of value in that. And we should, as the body of Christ, be more willing to, first of all, give one another grace in the decisions that we make, but two, see, is there something we can do to, support that, even if we want to, some churches, and I do know some churches who were like, we're going to cancel service, but we're going to host our own Super Bowl party. So invite your friends and family. We're going to have
careful
wings, pizza, all that stuff. But then there were other churches who were like, well, we're going to have church service, but our service is going to end at 6:30. And it's going to be just in time for the kickoff and all that stuff. So, as soon as service is done, hang around. We've got the game going on and enjoy. So like I feel like there's a lot of different opportunities here that wherever on the fence you lie, you can get into.
Dude, all the things you just described, though, are opportunities to get into enormous trouble if you're a church. It literally is almost impossible for any church to host a Super Bowl party, have viewing of the Super Bowl on the premises, anything like that, without breaking the law and even without getting the attention of the people who will report you and come after you. I mean, they've been so nasty. There's so many examples in the news over the past decade or so. There's I don't think any church could afford the fees that it would require if there is even a mechanism anymore for showing this thing. Even so what churches have wound up doing is these kind of like funny play loophole, letter of the law things where they're like, okay, well, we're going to be having a church service at Bob's house at
5 o'clock, yeah,
sometime between this point and this point. And if you also are already at Bob's house, you'll notice that there's a Super Bowl party that Bob is having personally.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I'm not, I'm not advocating for anything illegal, but, I mean, there are definitely churches out there that, have the money and could do something like that. But, it's just, it's being open to, saying, what can we do to encourage people to, again, this is one of the times of the year where people would willingly show up to something like this without, question for, I'm in church, I'm hanging around believers and, having a good time. And to me, that's a really cool thing when unbelievers are able to look at Christians and say, you know what, I really like this person. I think they're fun to be around with. I enjoy them. I think they're intelligent. They, make a lot of sense. The only thing that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is this Jesus thing. And to me, that's, the epitome of what Paul talks about with the offense of the gospel is that, we want to make sure that our lives are, lived in such a biblical way that people are able to look at us and just see, unbelievers. There's this weird dichotomy where, Christ drew unbelievers to himself. He had to have been a likable person. People had to have enjoyed being with him and enjoyed being around him. But of course, he was still the Son of God. And so, being able to have that type of personality where, the only offense that we're putting before people is the gospel, to me is worth it. But that's my thought and 2 cents on it.
Okay, I think we're in absolute agreement. It reminds me of things like the whole issue with Christmas services and whether you're allowed to cancel it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whether we want to be viewed by the world as these kind of joyless, puritanical, and I'm using that in the world sense.
Right.
And also in the historical sense, because they sure hated Christmas.
Right.
Kind of people, or the kind of people that are mocked on Arrested Development when he accidentally winds up with Anne's family, or the Onion article from more than a decade ago, like Christmas ruined by religious relative, and we don't want to be that.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I mean, if it's memes we're talking about, we need to make sure we don't have a thin skin. I mean, we can bust balls and be busted, alike.
Right.
Lately, the whole country has been getting more and more whiny and thin-skinned and pathetic. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing about, like some of the edgiest comedians now being, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I told a joke." And I don't want to see the church falling through, along with this, where we're just constantly like, "Oh, wait, how dare you say something funny about skipping church for a Super Bowl?" I mean, you can tell. I don't know what things you saw. You can tell if it's friendly, semi-friendly, or really meant to be this kind of condemnation. Right. So if it's memes we're talking about, I mean, no harm, no foul. Who cares? It's the Super Bowl, so it's not important to begin with. Yeah. If it's a meme about whether or not you went to Sunday night service or watched football, yeah. Right? Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit it on the head. It's it has a lot to do with, the person and the personality, knowing that person and, what their intent is in it. So, yeah, no, I definitely agree. So let's kind of shift gears here because we still have a lot of time to fill on this thing. And we haven't done them for a while, so I feel like, we kind of need to make up for it. Did you watch any of the State of the Union address?
No. Oh. That is fake news.
Darn it, neither did I.
I heard sound clips the next day. Nah.
Yeah.
I don't care. I've you know what? I've just for years would covet Ted Kluck whenever I would bring things like this up, and he wouldn't like disdainfully say, "I don't care about that." He would literally, honestly be able to say, "I'm not really a politics guy. I don't care." And he'd be so unaffected by all these things that had me all worked up, And in the last couple of years, I don't know what changed in the last couple. Oh, yes, I do. I have found myself just so easily going, a week at a time without thinking about this kind of stuff. I don't have the first desire to begin to watch the State of the Union address. Yeah. I occasionally will pop in on Drudge, or there's like a Drudge-ish thing that Adam Ford does. After he sold the Babylon Bee, he started this thing called the Daily Christian Observer. Observer. And it always depresses me. It's just like everything happening right now is depressing. Yeah. And yet, even if I read about it, I can't change it and it'll depress me. If I don't read about it, I don't know what's going on, and so I'm still not changing it, but I'm not depressed. Right. And I'm in a better frame of mind to minister to the people that I actually can affect. Yeah. So forget it. I have very little interest in it these days. Yeah. I do know, that there was a shutdown. There's possibly going to be another shutdown here shortly. I know what it's about. I mean, I'm not like oblivious to what's going on. Yeah. I'm just. I've finally, I don't know if it's a maturity thing, a exhausting, my ability to care and coming up empty, yeah, or what it is. But I finally am just not tied up in knots about it. And like I always copy over all of my favorite places, like manually. Yeah. When I change computers. So when I would open the Drudge Report, which, I mean, people think of as this right-wing news source, it's not even a news source, it's a news aggregator. So, right. I mean, they choose things that fit their grid, but, I mean, it's links to the New York Times and all these things. But when I bring it up, it says Drudge Report 2000 at the top. That's how long I've been doing that. That's almost 20 years. And just recently, I've not had any sense of like I gotta, and I've really been weeding it out of my Facebook feed and stuff too. I feel like, you know, like when people talk about like a cleanse, and they have this idea in their mind that by eating weird things or not eating normal things, or you know, whatever it is they're doing, drinking strawberry juice, you know, exclusively for 93 days or something, they're cleansing their body.
Right.
And they feel good, even though that doesn't do anything for you. I feel like not being obsessively following any of the political stuff is it's a soul cleanse, man. It feels great. Nice. Did you intentionally avoid it, or did you just happen to be busy, or you didn't catch it?
I happen to be busy. So Tuesday nights we hold our youth group night at church, and so you know I was busy at youth group, and I came home, and my wife had their state of the school address. So every year their school does an address to the parents, and it happened to fall on the State of the Union night. So she was out, I was out. She got home a little before I did. She said, you know, I put it on the first, 10 or so minutes, and was just like, I'm done. There's nothing, you know, it is what it is, you know. So I got home and she was watching, I think, like some Hallmark murder and mystery movie thing on the Hallmark channel.
More edifying anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So she was doing that, and I mean, she did. She asked if I wanted to watch it, and I was just like, no, I have no desire to. I'm sure I'll hear all about it in the morning when I go to school and get reports from there. Ironically, though, there was nothing that happened at school. Nobody was really talking about it. I didn't hear any big buzz off of it or anything like that. So, I'm kind of with you, Zach. I think it was around when President Obama was elected the second term. I remember the first term being, you know, more kind of hot-blooded and, you know, willing to argue and debate and really get into things. And I started seeing myself getting that way when he was elected the second time around. And I was just like, you know what? I just can't stand myself like this. For me, it was, I was becoming more associated with people who had more liberal tendencies in terms of their voting. And I was like, you know, my ability to talk to these people is it's diminishing more and more. And I would rather be able to, again, if I'm going to offend somebody with something, I'd rather do it with the gospel than with a political statement. And so I really spent a lot of time just working on not letting issues, political issues, bother me. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear. I do not think abortion's a political issue. I think it's a biblical moral issue. And so I do get invested into that one if someone brings up abortion. But things like taxes and tax reform and things like that, to me, I really, taxes are going to get raised. They're going to get lowered. It's not going to change the fact that God tells me to pay them. And so, what's the point in getting all hot-headed over whether somebody thinks we should raise or lower taxes? And I found that my ability to speak with people across the board dramatically changed. So much so, I just last week had a conversation with a woman about our podcast. I was doing Moving Up Night at school. It's an opportunity where students can come in and parents can come in and just look at what they're going to be doing in next year's setting and curriculum, meet next year's teachers, and just get a feel for what the next year is going to be. And I was there, And I had a parent come up to me because I do the podcasting elective for middle school, and she was like, "Oh, you have a you teach the podcast class? Yep. Do you have a podcast?" I said, "I do." And, explained a little bit about, what we do on these Go to 11, and, said we just kind of talk about life and things from a Christian perspective, but we look at, all sorts of different topics. It's not just limited to, the Bible. We also, we'll talk about comic books and movies and, all sorts of different things. And I said, we've talked politics a little bit, and she kind of just perked her ears up a little bit, and she was like, "Now let me ask you a question. What do you think about the evangelical community backing Trump?" And I was just like, I just chuckled a little bit, and I said, honestly, I don't know why when we think of the evangelical community and the voices of the evangelical community as it's thought of in America, why they really have to put an official quote-unquote endorsement behind anyone. Just put out information about what platform the candidates are running on, put out the facts about the candidates, and just, tell people, hey, this is your vote, use your conscience, let God guide you in who you think you should vote for, and move on. I think, unfortunately, that burned a lot of bridges for people when support was thrown behind Trump instead of, doing what I just talked about. What are your thoughts on that, Zach?
Agree.
You're like, dude, I'm not talking about this at all. Move on.
I will say this: the abortion issue. When you mentioned that, all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I haven't been silent on this stuff on social media. My social media has been all abortion, nonstop now for like 2.5 to 3 weeks because of crap that's going on.
Right.
And it occurred to me at one point, I'm like, man, I must seem shrill to certain people. I really don't care, though.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to bother me.
Right.
But like, I agree that it's a different. That's a whole qualitatively different thing from, this new freshman congresswoman thinks that we can, borrow $14 trillion and rebuild every building in America and put high-speed trains in, and it's like, okay, that's not going to happen. So why are we yelling at each other about it?
Right.
Yes, she's stupid. Yes, this is all ridiculous, but shouting about it is just, it's sport.
Yeah.
And what's the point of it? It's a dumb sport. I mean, like at least the Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. The process of getting there is fun.
Right.
And I know people for whom politics is like their Super Bowl, and if this was the worst Super Bowl ever, I feel like politics is always the worst game ever. It's never it's never a good one. Once in a while, like when like the New York Times breaks the blue dress or whatever, you're like, holy crap, that happened.
Right.
I mean, even that's depressing, but there's a certain amount of like, wow, this is a big deal, and we're all discussing it, and we're all but most of the time it's just taking nothing and filling our lives with it.
Yeah.
And I say that like I'm above it, but I'm not. Like, I have to intentionally avoid it.
Right.
I find outrage to be a very satisfying drug. Like the kind of righteous indignation, and I follow enough people who also do, where it's easy to think that that's normal and that's what Christians ought to be doing right now.
Yeah.
Like I have a number of pastors on my Facebook feed who every day they repost articles about, how the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and like comment on how this isn't, the way God wants things to be. And it's like, well, doy.
It hasn't been that way since the garden.
Right, yeah. Like, I mean, am I, at some point, if I add up the amount of time I've spent whining about the way things are going in a given year, and ask myself if I had taken that amount of time to actually make a difference in someone's life. And so I guess the question comes up is, just as like the Super Bowl, you could say someone who watches – I think you can – I'm going to go like 4 digressions deep, but I'm going to come back out. I'm following myself.
All right.
You can make a case for the guy who watches every single NFL game is wasting a bunch of time and it's bad stewardship because there are so many combined hours.
Yeah, yeah.
But the guy who has his team and he watches all of their games is relaxing, is doing what humans do, right? He's enjoying himself. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
And so in the same way, you have to ask the question, like, is there a legitimate entertainment value to just being like the news guy, the news junkie, the political guy? Maybe, if it doesn't poison your soul.
Yeah.
You have to know yourself. Just in the same way, like I can go to the Indian casinos around here.
Yeah.
I can bring $50, convert it into $50 and quarters, and then as the night goes on, what's left into nickels.
Yeah.
And I can spend 6 hours and have a ball.
Yeah.
And I know I'm fine. I'm not worried I'm going to get out a credit card and start getting advances. I'm not worried about my life. But there are people for whom that would be very toxic for them to start doing.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I feel like for me, I can't just say, all right, let me get out the news and have a little fun with it and enjoy it. No, I'm going to be getting out the credit cards, and I'm going to be, in hock for $300,000, and my house is going to be remortgaged 6 times to push the metaphor.
Right.
Because I'll get outraged and I'll get – dude, I will even do what I know is the most foolish thing in the world, and that is engage the comments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a rookie move. And yet I'll do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It sucks you in so deep and so bad. So let me ask you this, Zach. At what level do you separate, or how do you separate, or can you even answer this question once I get to it?
Or can you even get to it?
That's right. At what level do you separate legitimate politics and being involved and informed and wanting to make good decisions, and I'll just leave it generic like this, make good decisions based on your conscience and where you believe you should be voting, versus getting sucked into the sport and entertainment of politics?
Well, but what I'm saying is that it's not even necessarily wrong to get into the entertainment of it. Like,
no, I'm more specifically talking about you, your personality. I'm more talking about your personality. For the listeners out there who are thinking, yeah, that's me.
Well, it's not hard for me to stay. It's hard for me to be less informed. Like, there's no danger of me not knowing what's going on. And I mean, when I say I have been avoiding news, I listen to talk radio all the time, not like Rush Limbaugh and stuff. I used to do that. It just made me too angry.
Right.
So ironically, I listen to NPR, even though I'm a conservative, and it makes me sort of angry.
Right.
Because I disagree with a lot of the point of views they're pushing and the worldview they're pushing, but it's not designed to piss me off.
Right.
Like yesterday, there was here's a microcosm. Yesterday, a guy I know, I live in the capital city of Michigan, so there are people who are very involved in state politics, and there are a lot of people who, politics is really kind of fun stuff for them. So there's a guy that I'm friends with on Facebook. He posted something about Elizabeth Warren. They had come out with this document that years ago she had written down American Indian as her race. And he said, this is going to tank her chances at being the president. Thoughts? ? And like 4 or 5 people that were friends with him jumped in and they were like analyzing it. Like, well, that's interesting, but remember Some people thought that so-and-so was done when a similar thing happened, and then there was enough time that passed and the electorate forgets. And it was just like this nerdy, like how you and I might talk about Green Arrow or something.
Sure.
They were talking about, it was just, it was fun. And then some like rando guy with like the bald eagle, profile picture, bald eagle holding an AK-47 or something,
America.
comes in. And he's just, all he wants to do is be angry and rage about it.
Yeah.
And he killed it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean he killed it when you say, wow, that guy, he went in there and did a great job, he killed it. No, I mean he killed the conversation.
Right.
He said one thing, and it sucked the fun. It sucked anyone's will to keep on engaging, except for a couple of people just as rabid on the liberal side who engaged him. And it just churned the whole thing into, this is no longer, hey, let's talk about this. It's, hey, let's fight about this.
Yeah.
And I think that for me personally, I don't mind, when I read about quote unquote fourth trimester. Well, when I read about any form of abortion, I get angry, and I never want to lose that. I never want to be like, killing babies, that's okay.
Right.
I don't mind that. When I read about the bill that almost passed, where the governor of Virginia, who's now all mired in controversy, he said, "Oh yeah, well, if the baby's born and survives, they'll just put it on ice, make it comfortable. I don't mean on ice literally,
right?
And then they'll have quote unquote the conversation." That made me first almost throw up.
Yeah.
Second, feel like I really had to struggle with what do I do with the anger and rage I'm feeling, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Because this is a huge injustice.
Right.
And there are a lot of things on that level. I mean, we all kind of pick what issues we're most passionate about, because you don't have enough rage currency.
Yeah.
As a healthy human being, you shouldn't have enough anyway to sit there and be mad about everything all the time.
Yeah.
But I have to be careful that just reading the news in general, day by day, doesn't raise my ire. That if I'm slurping on my coffee, I've already read my Valley of Vision, whatever, I'm just kind of thumbing through. I have a e-subscription to our local newspaper, and obviously they have national headlines and stuff, so I'll click through, and if I'm getting mad and my body's reacting to anger chemicals, I just close it all out. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah.
I think my own reaction to it is the yardstick for it. Yeah. And if I'm reading about, what are there, 379 possible Democratic presidential candidates, there's a lot of people. It's like the Republicans were a year out before the primaries started last time around.
Right.
And I think it's interesting to read about this stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me mad. And so I read about it. I'm not worried that it's gonna affect me, but if I'm reading about even laws that everyone knows aren't going to pass, and they're introduced, the bills are introduced to make a statement.
Yep.
And they just start making me mad. I don't know. Can you think of a reason to keep on engaging with it? If it's not something I can change, if it's not something that's probably going to affect anything, can you? I'm not even being rhetorical.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, one of the things that I told this parent was I got so annoyed with literally annoyed with the election, because I would get into it big time. I mean, all throughout high school and college, I would debate and argue with people in high school. Whenever we had groups that were set up to do mock juries or trials or things like that, I was always the one that they would choose to argue and debate, because I loved doing it and I very passionate about it. But the reason why I'm like that is because I really get involved in it. And so it's not just a logical argument for me. I really get emotionally into it. And, that can be good and bad, because being emotionally invested in something like that, you can also, manipulate others and all that stuff. I mean, it's, crazy. And for me, getting involved in like the presidential elections where they're sitting there talking about all this stuff, and I remember all the promises that were made when our current president was, in the midst of the debates and all of that stuff. You look at all of the promises that were broken and, some of them that were kept. And, for me, I had to look at both candidates and I had to just decide that at that level, I was not comfortable with either option for president. And so, and that's what it was, it was like you have this choice or this choice, and I know people are like, well, but there is the other, middleman and blah, blah, and it's like, but not really. I mean, let's be realistic. That's not really a choice. If it was, one of them would have been president by now. I mean,
I see you're a cynic.
Just a little. But for me, like, I was just, so emotionally, hating on people on both sides. I was just like, I just can't do this. I need to step away from this and just make myself not care. And literally, once I did that, my perspective completely changed in terms of, I can re-engage with people and talk to them as people when I don't have the cloud of, oh, my candidate's great because of this. My candidate, it's like unfortunately, it's politics, and they're either intentionally or unintentionally, they're going to lie to you. I don't think it's all intentional lying, but I think intentionally or unintentionally, they're going to lie to you about something at some point. And, that's what it is, And so for me, I decided that I was going to start focusing on local elections and things that were going on locally and, trying to influence and make more of an impact and difference in my state, in my county, than worrying about, what's going on in the United States as a whole, because for me, that was setting me off. So, and like you said, it's not worth it at that point. I would rather, cut that off and spare some relationships where I can share the gospel with people than burn that, because I have burned those before, unfortunately. I have wasted my gospel credit on politics before. So,
yeah, that's so common, and I think a lot of people don't even recognize when they're conflating and confusing the two.
Yeah.
And so I mean, what do you do though if someone hears what you just said and answers with like, well, yeah, sure, it's easier to be apathetic, but then nothing changes and you're supporting the status quo. And what if we were all apathetic all the time? And you said you had
right.
that jeez.
Yeah.
I have a tongue. It's a new tongue. I'm just getting used to it. You said you had to force yourself to not care,
right.
And I know what you meant, but
right.
I mean, I could imagine somebody
right.
Who was very, very passionate about these things,
right? And to me, what I would say is from a biblical perspective, I would say no. I don't think that it's a trigger for everyone. I'm saying for me, it was a trigger, and until I can learn to control that trigger. And bring it under Christ's authority and submission, that I am sinning. This is where I would say, where Christ talks about, if your right hand offends you, cut it off. If your eyes are causing you to sin, gouge it. Like, for me, this is what I had to do in order to not sin. And to me, that's more important than, my civic duty in this country. Now, hopefully, I hope and pray that one day I will be able to re-engage in a way, but until I can start re-engaging without sinning, I'm not going to. And so what I mean is like it's not like I just completely cut myself off and I'm not trying to re-engage. It's every time I re-engage and I get to that point, I'm like I can't do it anymore. And I have dealt with people who have said that, and that's been my response. And some people are like, well, I disagree with you, blah 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 blah, and other people are like, oh, that's cool, blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, I've got to worry about my relationship with Christ and how I'm coming across to others when I present the gospel. And if you can engage in the political scene and not get to that place where you are, damaging your witness with the gospel, then more power to you. Like I hope that people can get to that place, that people can rise up and even get into politics to make change and difference to the glory of God. And I think there are people who are doing that, and I hope more people can do that. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. At least not right now. So that would be my response.
All right. My straw man is satisfied with that.
No red herring for me?
That whole thing was a red herring. How did you not see that coming?
Oh, man.
So tell me, man, what was the worst and what was the best Super Bowl commercial?
Oh, man. Honestly, there were tons of worsts. I'll tell you what the best one was. The best one was they did this like top 100 football players, and they're all sitting at this award ceremony, and the awards are going off, and this one guy's like leaning in to grab a piece of cake, one of the football players, and he drops the football that's on the top of this cake, and somebody yells fumble, and so now all the football players are in trying to get the football and having this game. To me, that was the best one. They had Joe Montana in it. Tom Brady was in it, of course. So many of these, like I said, what they would consider the top 100 players. And it was a fun commercial. It was really well done. So that would have been my best one. And then, the worst one, there were just, like I said, there were just so many that I looked at and was like, this is dumb. This is, and a lot of
crass like they have been recently.
Not tons of them, because I usually remember those. They were just very unmemorable. I feel like if you're going to invest that much money in a football commercial, it should be something that I remember one way or the other. It should be in my memory. I feel like all of these were just very forgettable. And to me, that's what made it, that's what just made them so bad, was that none of them really stuck with you. I remember, I do remember one, there was like an Olay commercial, like the, like the face cream Olay, and it was like the serial killer was coming through the house, and the wife was commenting on her beautiful skin, and the husband was commenting, and then the serial killer behind her is like, "Oh, it really is great." Like, it was kind of funny, but it was like again, it was just, a lot of it was just really lame, and I really didn't remember a bunch of them. But yeah, the best one was definitely the top 100 football one. So if you haven't seen that, go on YouTube and I think it's like top 100 football players Super Bowl commercial, and take a look at it. It's pretty good.
What do you think is the best one you've ever seen?
Best one I've ever seen by far, I think it was the 2002 Super Bowl. It was the very first commercial. It was a Budweiser commercial. And it was it was around the time where battle bots were really big. And so this one battle bot comes out of the arena, and it's got all the saws and blades and, the blow torches.
This is the Comedy Central show? Where they would fight each other? You have remote control robots? Okay,
yeah. So it was kind of a spinoff on that. And then this like rickety old refrigerator comes out, and it's like wobbling and creaking, and it opens its door, and there's a Budweiser inside of it. And the hand from like the juiced up robot goes to reach out, and this huge metallic mallet comes out from behind the fridge and just starts pounding the thing just over and over and over again. It was hysterical because the timing of the commercial was just such that you really weren't expecting it. And so to me, it was the funniest and most memorable one that I've seen. What about you? What's one that you've seen that has been really memorable for you?
I think my favorite one ever was this was probably 5 or 6 years ago. There was a Chrysler commercial with Eminem.
Okay.
And they were like launching their new slogan ad campaign, imported from Detroit.
Okay.
And it was so it was like the guitar music from Lose Yourself, and he was driving a Chrysler through downtown Detroit, and then he pulled up to the Fox Theater and went inside, and like there was a big like inner city kids choir going, and I remember just being like, "Oh, that was so awesome!" And then I was all excited, and then it started showing football again, and I was like, "Oh yeah."
Oh right, that's what's really going on here. What's the worst one you've ever seen?
Oh gosh, I feel like there was a few years like before my kid was born, or when he was still a baby. We stopped doing this way back then, but we used to do a sub sandwich thing. Like the youth group would make a bunch of sub sandwiches. We'd sell them after church. Yep. And use the money for camp scholarships for kids. And one year we had done that, and I guess we were probably breaking the law. Somebody like powered up the thing, and we were watching the TV. And it was like a tube TV. This is how long ago it was. We were using the rabbit ears, and we tuned it in. And I remember I immediately like turned it off after 2 or 3 commercials because they were all way inappropriate. Yeah. And I feel like there was like a year or two where they were like, people thought, you know what we could do? We could make a commercial, submit it for being, $1 million a second Super Bowl commercial, and then it'll be so tawdry and gross that they'll reject it. But then we'll be on the morning news shows, and we can go online and be like, look, this was too hot for Super Bowl, but it's still a Super Bowl commercial.
Yes, I do remember that.
Pyro marketing. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
It was an awful year. Because like even the ones that made it through were super crass. Yes. And I mean, I'm not above laughing at a joke that maybe I even shouldn't. That's right. a little bit blue. Right. But these were just gross, and you watch and go, come on. Yeah. Have some class. Yeah. This thing is supposed to be this all-American. Families, fathers and sons can watch it together. The kids can be there. Everybody, the families can do this. Yeah. And this is what you want to show us. This is what in your mind represents an all-American, event like the Super Bowl. And it was a really sad yardstick. But I feel like that kind of came and went. Yeah. It was. Like you said, it was almost like a fad that happened for a few years, and I don't even know that it was much beyond 3 years. Maybe you do, but I think it was like that 3-year period, and then, like you said, it was done. But let me ask you this: so Super Bowls you've watched, best halftime show you remember? I don't want to say. Are you going to judge me? No. I really thought Lady Gaga. Was that last year or the year before? I think it was the year before. I think Justin Timberlake was last year. Holy smokes, I thought it was great. I don't like Lady Gaga. I don't have any of her CDs or anything. And I know that sounds dated, but I still listen to CDs. But, I don't know. I think maybe because my expectations were so low. Yeah. I was like, what? Like, you have a dumb name. I know she's like a wannabe Madonna and all this kind of stuff. And then she started, and I'm like, oh, I know that song. Oh, I know that song. I didn't know that was her. And then, she had like all these theatrics, and she was like way up on way up in the sky and all this stuff. And I was just kind of like, wow, this is American excess at its most entertaining. Yeah. No, I think that one was. I agree with you. I think that was a good one. I wouldn't say that it was one that I thought was my favorite. I actually really liked the one. I think it was 4 years ago that Bruno Mars did. I really enjoyed that one. I mean, part of that, I really enjoy Bruno Mars. I think he's a great singer. Kind of that poppy,
just, really talented. So that one I really enjoyed. But I agree with you. I think that was definitely in one of my favorites over the past several years. So I'm not going to go too far back, but kind of worst one in recent memory, excluding the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake one.
Oh, that was going to be mine. Well, I understand this year's was horrible. I feel you gotta refresh my memory. I mean, I've seen most of these things, and I've been underwhelmed by almost every one. So remind me.
So like I said, I think Justin Timberlake was last year. I think like 3 years ago it was what's her name? Come on, it's escaping me. Katy Perry. I think she was like
Katy Perry. I didn't see that one, but that was my least favorite.
Nice. Actually, I was going to say that one was. I think that one was my least favorite out of. It's funny because I was at the Super Bowl party and we were talking about them, and everybody immediately went to the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake, and it's like that one's just so obvious, though.
That was the most emotionally scarring.
Right.
What that was.
Yes. But yeah, I think Katy Perry's was. It was just really weird. Like she was dressed up in like this weird, like almost like star, like silver space clothing, and like she was riding this huge lion. And
I do remember this. I did see that.
Yeah, I was just like, this is just so weird.
No, but you know what was my least favorite? Actually, this is going back 5 years or maybe more.
Okay.
Probably more because this is when there was a brief time when I was sharing my wife's home office before we realized that was a bad idea because she actually works from home. This was her office, whereas
right.
For me it was like where I like dinked around and wanted to chat. But
right.
I remember like watching the halftime show with Beyonce. And thinking, gosh,
yeah.
That was a real disaster, and that was like the opposite, right? Like with Lady Gaga, my expectations were low, and
right.
then it exceeded them. With Beyonce, my expectations were through the roof, and it wasn't good. And then when somebody like posted all those like stills,
yes.
right, where she was, and granted, I mean, she's a very lovely lady, and anyone who's exerting themselves with all those, kicks and crazy dance moves and stuff, yeah, you're going to be able to find them pulling weird faces. But, like, that kind of painted it after the fact and made it even worse.
Right.
And, I think that was the one with, like, again, there was no wardrobe malfunction except the initial selection of
right.
all this, like, skin-tight leather and really, really revealing stuff. And I'm like, again, guys, this is a thing for kids and adults alike. This isn't where you're supposed to, try and use sex to
right.
sell. I don't know what you're even trying to sell. We're already watching the Super Bowl. We're already doing the thing you want us to do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You've got a captive audience, no questions asked. So, yep. Let me ask you, favorite party that you can remember attending?
I have been to very few. I'd probably say I've been to between 7 and 10 Super Bowl parties in my 40 years.
Okay.
My favorite one would have to be when I was a kid. We went over to some friends from church, and most of the people from church were there. And there were 3 or 4 guys my age, mm-hmm. and we kind of went back and forth between like hanging out in the kid who lived there's room and just chatting and playing video games,
yep.
and then kind of coming back out, loading our plates back up with more dip and chips and junk food,
yep.
watching a little more of the game, checking the score, watching a couple commercials, going back in. And I remember that being an incredibly fun time. And the next year asking, hey, are they having that party again? And being super disappointed when the answer was no one's doing a party this year.
Yeah. Nice.
I will tell you, one guy from my church, when I texted everybody and said, bad news, I'm not going to be able to host this, wrote back, that's fine by me because I have to be at my house for a Super Bowl party that I'm apparently hosting. I think that's a lot of people feel that maybe the obligation from friend groups, spouses, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you? What's the best party?
So the best one that I can remember was my senior year of college. Actually, I was interning at the youth group, and one of the wealthier families in the church, huge home, invited the entire youth group over to watch it at their house. So what they had done was kind of set everything up on their third floor, where they had this climbing wall that the kids could use. They had like video games set up in one room where kids could play in, and then they had like the TV on the other end of the house that kids who wanted to watch. And then like kind of in the center of everything was just 4 or 5 of those like long plastic fold-up tables of food, just pizza, wings, chips, dessert, like just everything. And it was kind of like what you were talking about, where there was a bunch of stuff going on, and so you were just having a good time regardless of whether you were watching the game, playing a couple video games, jumping on the climbing wall that they had, whatever you were doing, you were having a good time, and just a fun experience. So I feel like I enjoy those experiences that aren't necessarily specifically tied to the Super Bowl. Things where a lot of other stuff is going on and the game is fun and you're getting together and you're rallying together at certain points. You're in there when a big touchdown happens, and those things are great. But like when you can kind of duck out and do a couple other things and hang out with some other people, I really enjoy those moments and experiences.
Well, and all of my favorite, I can't stir up. I'm not NFL guy. I can't stir up interest in a team that I have no connection with and be like, all right, this is the one I'm rooting for, and I care strongly about this. Like how I have to struggle not to care strongly about every headline. I wouldn't be able to stir up enough. And so my favorite Super Bowls that I've watched have actually been the ones where the Lions have played, which is none. So maybe that's why I don't really care so much.
So we got to make sure the Lions get in there, and then you might kind of care.
I would absolutely. That would be. I can't even imagine what would be the tenor and the vibe throughout the high five up here if the Lions ever made it to the Super Bowl. But I know that I will never find out, so it's moot speculation at this point.
Oh man, that's funny. Man, dude. Well, this was good. I kind of finished the original round of talking about the Super Bowl and everything within 20 minutes and was like, man, how are we going to burn some more time? So I threw out the whole State of the Union stuff and...
Oh, no need to tell me. I was there. I'm trying to keep our feud going low-key under the surface.
That way, when we have a really hot topic, we can bring it right out again, huh?
Yeah, the ire will still be fresh.
Oh, man, dude. All right, well, just again, reminder to our listeners, next week is Valentine's Day on the 14th, Thursday the 14th. Zach, we talked about it. We're going to try to do our best to record, at some point. I will say, I can't remember if I said this on air or just off air to you. I've started master's classes, trying to further my education, and I very busy schedule. We are going to try to do a recording next week, but if we don't worry, folks. We haven't dropped off the face of the planet. We will definitely be back the 21st for a recording once again with Mike Callahan from Building Hope Ministries. So, Zach, this was a lot of fun. Until next time. We just rocked the Casbah.
These go to 11.